You know what? There's been a lot of negativity in my commentary videos, a lot more than intended, so instead of fixating on a game that wears out its welcome before it's even over, or loses its magic over a series run, let's talk about something a bit different, a game that would still be great if it were maintained at all. That's right, today we're talking about Gabe Newell's biggest number 2 of all time. But this isn't going to be your standard ranking of like, what's the meta in 2024, who should you main, what weapon should you use. Instead, we're going to run down all 9 classes and rank them from a game design perspective. Before we get to number 10, one quick anti-shitstorm disclaimer. TF2 is a masterclass in game design overall. Despite its many flaws, it is still well above industry standard, in theory, and when I point those flaws out, I ain't claiming I could design a better game from the ground up or something. Hindsight's 2020, and one of the largest communities any game has ever enjoyed had the liberty of over 15 years to dissect and discuss its every minuscule misstep. This entire video is a hobbyist and a casual player's good faith, good fun analysis. Got all that? Good. Let's move on to the painfully predictable bottom pick.
It's like Christmas morning.
Oh, trust me, the contrarian within was searching desperately for a way to subvert this softball take, but come on, what do you want out of me? The only list he's ever gonna top is someone's shit list, and by someone's I mean everyone's. But you know what? I'll try to present a slightly fresh gripe at least. The sniper almost feels like a class created just for the sake of having them, kinda. Think about it. Overhealed heavies, scouts being virtually home free once they escape enemy base with the intel, the existence of other snipers. Sure, we might need an infinite range insta-kill class to deal with them, but wouldn't it be better if those things are just, tunes such that we didn't? Everything the sniper hard counters feels like it exists more so to give him something to do than because the game really needs it in the first place. He's an utterly blunt tool who's more or less equally effective against every class that doesn't hard counter him, because outside of hard counters there's little counterplay to begin with. Layers of complexity that everyone else needs to deal with are completely whittled away. Things like approach strategy, retreat strategy, movement, stealth, sustain, and dodging. What take their place is a slow and dull playstyle that rewards consistent aim, handsomely but exclusively. I guess there's also the matter of choosing your sightlines wisely, but aside from that, you're pretty much just clicking the head of the highest priority target. A task made infinitely more stressful by the fact you're relying on TF2's shoddy hit detection and poorly optimized netcode to recognize whether a single 90-meter scan line intersects with the 5 pixels on your screen that represent the enemy heavy's cranium. I mean, what more needs to be said? It's sure to fight a bore to play in a class that makes it hard to even determine where the error lies if you're doing poorly. Bottom rung, no question. You know how Sniper's skill set basically makes his only real counter in a 1v1 scenario himself? Well, Medic is basically the same problem, but on a broader team composition scale. With the ability to completely heal his team between skirmishes, increase a single ally's effective health pool by granting them constant regeneration, increase their actual health pool with the overheal mechanic, and then increase their effective health even more if he's using the vaccinator, and have those easy for old many life efforts mechanic. Periodic spurts of full invulnerability are unlimited triple damage, and that's just what I put up slot. I think it's safe to call Medic one of the most busted support classes in any game ever. If the other team's got a Medic, you need a medic. If they have 2 medics, you need 2 medics. The problem there being, his playstyle's the literal opposite to what most people are hoping to do when they boot up a first-person shooter, that being, a game where persons compete to be the first to shoot the other. When you come home from a long day of work and sit down to unwind with some TF2, I doubt the experience you were hoping for was Luigi's Mansion, but you're the ghost's submissive girlfriend. But I certainly hope it is, because somebody's got to do it and I don't want it to be me. As a result, if your team's missing any one class, it's probably going to be a medic. And then you end up with those awkward standoffs where one guy's like, so anybody gonna go medic? And you want to say, why don't you go medic? Except you're afraid the third guy will say, I don't know, why don't you go medic? The reason he ranks one spot over Sniper is that he does at least feel organically necessary, so to speak. Like, we don't need medics solely because, I don't know, Afterburn was artificially overtuned to the point you couldn't survive a single Scorch Shot flare without him, or because 8 out of 9 classes need Overheal to survive a single Rocket Splash. If he was Rebellious with slightly stronger offense, but so that he did more of his healing between fights, he'd rank a lot higher. A less frontline focused health economy would result in a lot more time spent in the respawn queue, but it'd also make choke point stalemates less sustainable. Pair that with a shorter respawn time, you got matches with a bit more back and forth in terms of ground gained and lost. Maybe. I think. The truth is, there's a lot of player-side game psychology that require practical testing, and I'm not a source modder with a 100k audience to pull guinea pigs from, so, I don't know, Vorabay, Interstellus, when do you two try? Great Blue, hey Great Blue, when a collab, Great Blue, Great Blue, Great Blue, Great Blue. What might surprise you is that despite everything I've said, I wouldn't remove the Uber. Not because it's a mechanic I like, but because it's the one load-bearing crutch this game genuinely couldn't stand without, at least in my opinion. Sometimes you really do just need an invincible beat stick to unclog around a CP Dust Bowl. In theory, crafting a version of the game where those don't occur would be not only a video unto itself, but the longest one I ever produced. You know what? New soft rule. If one change to one class would demand a total rework to 3+ other classes, we don't touch that.
Destroy the entire world!
Counterplay issues strike again, though at least in this case they're more situational. There are actually quite a few things that counter heavy, you know, without a medic in a more open or complex arena. But if a heavy steps into the room you're in, you just die! Fun fact, with his base minigun he's got an average close range DPS of around 500. Now sure, you might be thinking, yeah, very close range. But with a peak that absurd, it'll still kill most classes in a couple seconds at medium range. And even at deceptively long ranges, you'll still need to respect it and be ready to take cover. It takes like a long payload map sideline between you and him before the damage becomes truly irrelevant. Some maps like 2 Fort, I don't think sidelines long enough to where you can ignore a heavy even exist. This might sound like a crazy take, but I'd actually much rather Valve made him even more tanky but reduced his DPS. He does serve his role as a dissuasive, ground-holding force well in his current state, but my problem is that he also serves as a random indie horror jump scare that'll game end you by merely appearing on your screen. Doing less upfront damage, but being able to stick to the floor a bit longer to pump out more sustained damage overall feels like a good compromise. The other major problem with Heavy is that he's not fun to play. With the slowest movement speed in the game, no movement tech, and a sluggish primary that you'll be using 99% of the time, the class doesn't offer much in the way of thrills, except maybe to players who inherently enjoy the sensation of hurting things that couldn't hope to hurt them back. Like, these gamers so desperate they'll make entire video essays defending the idea that just using their stock secondary is a subclass. Doesn't that kind of say it all? Not only how little variety there is in his unlockables, but how absolutely glued to weapon slot 1 he is during normal gameplay. If they did give him a secondary that's as transformative as Pyro's flare gun, would he even care? Probably not, because Big Gun go Gentlemen,
I have come to say the N-word.
Finally, we're out of the woods on OP, borderline uncounterable classes. But sadly, that don't mean we're quite off the hook for extremely annoying classes. While he may be far from overpowered in a 1v1, having a single spy over your enemy team might not win you the game, he's still a class with a very unpleasant game plan. Namely, materializing out of nowhere to one-shot you while you're either completely engaged with someone else, or completely unengaged because you're not doing anything at the moment. That's what makes Spy such a unique and tricky case. It's infuriating to suddenly die to him out of nowhere, but the risk-reward, time investment, and pinch of luck required to execute his plan is actually pretty balanced. And of all the many, many ways this game lets you go from 200 to 0 HP in one game tick, the backstab's the last one I'd want to get rid of. I genuinely spent hours just trying to brainstorm ways the backstab could do its job without being a one-shot, an overall spy boss that could accompany it. But you know what? I got nothing. If you backstab Heavy and he doesn't die instantly, he's just gonna wheel around with that aforementioned 500 DPS and disintegrate you instantly. Same story with basically any other power class. Make it spy and effective counter solely to snipers and medics with unattentive pockets at that point. Yeah, I'm gonna invoke the medic clause again, but at least the middle point of the list feels like a good place to use it. It's a class I don't really like, but I get it. It's kinda gotta be this way. But now, since I spent quite a bit of time explaining why I don't know what to say on him, how fun is he? As for playing against him, like I already said, not very fun dying in one shot to someone you didn't know was there. Playing as him can be pretty fun, but with how heavily centralized he is behind the backstab mechanic, your enjoyment will depend very heavily on how frequently your enemies decide to randomly check their rear. As counterintuitive as it might sound for a stealthy pick class, I'd recommend not targeting lone stragglers too frequently. They're gonna be the most paranoid and least preoccupied targets, so instead disguise up, dive into the rear line of an enemy push, and resist the temptation to beeline straight for the heavy while staring longingly at his shoulder blades.
Nice hustle, tons of fun. Next time eat my ass!
Alright, now we're finally out of the woods completely. We're over the hump. We're onto the classes where, when I die to them, I don't briefly wish they were just patched out of the game entirely. Sure, scouts can be a bit annoying to deal with, being so fast and agile and having absurd burst damage at point-blank range, but there's no gimmick. They don't turn invisible, turn invincible, or absorb 2 direct pipes. You just shoot him better than he shoots you, and he dies before you die. Another thing that helps put him over the edge is that he's the first class to really have some meat to his loadout. You can play him fresh out the wrapper, focus on maximizing burst damage, increase his agility, dabble in some surprisingly effective long-range damage over time, or take him down one of 2 healing-focused routes. Now you might expect such a balanced and customizable class to rank higher than this, but what keeps him down is that, despite all that, he doesn't feel quite as essential as the classes coming up next. He's always a strong pick, but you won't necessarily need a scout every match, maybe outside of CTF mode. There aren't that many systems or other classes that he interacts with in a really impactful way. He doesn't hold the line, break defensive positions, check for spies, or help set up a lot of big plays. He's just a really good run-and-shoot guy who carries a briefcase faster than anyone else and maybe backcaps control points on a few maps. Even then, jumper classes can be faster and safer on some CTF maps, and they can also backcap too. Another thing that keeps him down this low is that not every map is built with him in mind. For every place like Mercenary Park that's full of alternate routes, cover, verticality, and intangible props to hide inside, there are 2 maps like Dust Bowl where you can see all 3 spawn doors and the first objective in one screenshot. But even when the map you're on looks straight out of Garten of Banban, he does still have the fastest run speed in the game and some insane close-range damage. The only things that really wall him out are sentries and explosive classes in confined spaces. If nothing else, being more a victim to than a perpetrator of the game's flaws puts him no lower than 5.
What makes me a good demo man?
Layers!
Demo man?
Have layers.
What, getting nervous that Pyro hasn't shown up yet? Demo's often paired with Soldier in a lot of different contexts, and I'd say it's a very deserved pairing in at least one sense. These 2 are what I consider the workhorse classes of the game. They both have decent durability, absurd burst mobility at a cost in the form of blast jumping, strong multi-target damage, powerful area denial, high sentry busting utility. Basically, if you want to be ready for just about any scenario that might show up, either is a strong choice. If your team already has all its specialist roles filled out, an extra Soldier Demo Man's a safe bet. Demo just happens to be slightly inferior. Now, you know I'm not racist. Well, actually, I guess you don't know I'm not racist, do you? But even if I was, that's not the reason. It's spam. You see, I pulled a bit of a bamboozle on you. Because this whole entry so far has been on how practical and strong they both are, but this list is on how good classes are for the game as a whole. And while the Soldier can be a bit spammy, especially if you have 2 of them firing down a choke point at the same time, the Demo's the king of spam. Not only does he have more shots as primary clip, but he needn't even reload to stop blindly assaulting your position. He need only switch to a secondary, which, oh, look at that, has even more shots per clip than his primary. And Gabe help you if the choke point you're at involves any change in elevation, since he has the only 2 weapons in the game that fire in a parabolic arc. Also, unlike the soldier, whose explosives travel on a set path and fire, demos roll and bounce all over the place and stick to surfaces, and get scattered by enemy explosions, and can be detonated mid-air. Yeah, 2 soldiers at the end of a hallway is a speed bump, but 2 demos is a concrete wall. There's also the flat 100 damage at any distance on direct pill hits, which is most of Allied class's health, half or more of everyone else's, and a third of heavies. Unless it's a random crit, then it's all of heavies. Unless the heavies overheal, then as for guaranteeable instant death, while sticky traps aren't exactly lacking in counterplay, well, they are just one more reason why nobody plays Arena, so that's worth mentioning.
Now just what in the sand fart are you supposed to be, maggot? Pathetic! Just pathetic!
I mean, I made it pretty obvious who was coming up next, but, well, here he is. There's a lot less to say about him because he's just so dead simple, but, you know, in a good way. He's a bit more mobility focused, using rocket jumps to reposition mid-engagement instead of solely to get into an initial position, with a slightly larger health pool and optional equipment that lets him reduce self-damage. While he may lack some of the crowd clear and spam potential of his counterpart, increased reactability and access to a solid hit scan option make his bad matchups a bit more manageable. In my eyes, he's the more all-round balance of the pair, possibly contending with Scout for most balance in the whole game, with strong and weak points, but nothing that he absolutely oppresses or gets oppressed by. The only thing I'd really change would be giving his rockets significantly less damage fall off. I know they are meant to be a close-range weapon, but still a bit deflating to nail someone across the map with a projectile that jogs along the sky and do like 30 damage. Genuinely, I can't think of a single good reason for Demo to ignore fall-off and direct hits, but not Soldier. Come on, Vale, give Sniper another thing to worry about. He could use it.
That guy's a spy!
Okay, I know, but hear me out here. If this were a power or popularity or even skill required ranking, he'd easily be somewhere in the bottom half. But in terms of design, like applying game design to a character, the amount of cool shit they crammed into this class while still managing to trick most people into thinking he's too simple is downright wild. Where do I even begin? Well, with the part that is simple, I guess. Loadout slot number 1, Primary Fire, WM1 as the player base affectionately dubs it. What people tend to skip over is that you do actually need to aim the fire directly at your target if you want to maximize DPS and afterburn. While it may be easy to hit someone by just flailing your mouse in wide 45-degree arcs, you're not going to be winning too many engagements that way. Additional layer, which is admittedly more than a bit annoying for the person you're playing against, is that you can hamper their view greatly by aiming right at their face. That's more of a side effect than a mechanic, but I do find it funny that the class is always meaned on for not needing to aim as one of the 3 that can possibly gain an advantage for headshots. Where the real versatility starts is with the Air Blast. Being able to control the enemy's movement is always a good perk to have, but that's far from the only thing it can do. It also extinguishes burning teammates, but more importantly, it can deflect almost any physical projectile in the game, and in any direction you want at that. This has countless applications, from clearing out traps, to self-defense, to dealing heavy burst counter damage in one-on-one engagements, to redirecting projectiles towards completely unaware clusters of enemies, to locking the previous 2 classes out of their sentry-busting capabilities. Being able to make so many distinct strategic choices off a single one-button command themed around blow and air is genuinely impressive. Especially in a world where cooldowns are king and some games will expect your mouse to come with more than 3 buttons. And of course, that ain't even getting into all the wacky bull hockey you can get into with his unlockables. Want to give yourself long-range capabilities? How about a 3-weapon combo that deals huge single-target damage? Maybe dive in from the sky or take unexpected flanks to dish out crits from behind? Perhaps something more forbidden? Forbidden. All this versatility in micro-strategy, macro-strategy, and equipment build makes Pyro a class that truly never gets boring to play. What does sadly bring him down a bit is that A, he can be a bit annoying to deal with depending on your class, and B, he ain't the strongest at any particular role. He can change roles on a dime, and basically anything besides sentry busting is manageable, and while it is good to have every tool you could ever need right on hand at once, he'll never be as good as having a heavy, or a scout, or a spy in position. But I also can't dock many points because he shouldn't be that good. He might not be the strongest, but he is ridiculously fun and supremely versatile while remaining fairly balanced and cohesive all around. And for that, I give him the ludicrously controversial rank of second best class in the game.
Don't worry, boys. The engineer is game day.
I feel like you either guessed this one from the beginning or you could never possibly be convinced, but let me go into some autistic detail anyway. The engineer is The engineer is Team Fortress 2. He is the pacing. He is the strategy. His sentry nests are the catalyst around which everything, the teamwork, the big plays, the Hail Mary pushes, the clutch saves, materialize. The exact position of his sentry, dispenser, and teleporter all but determines the routes both teams will take through the map. He creates defensive bases, miniature respawn rooms away from the respawn room, wherever he pleases. He's the Fortress in Team Fortress 2! Woo! And yet, despite the singular command he holds over both his friends and enemies, he's also perfectly balanced and perfectly integrated. As powerful as his utilities are, they're also completely stationary, and they take time and commitment to set up, and they stick out like a sore thumb. The beauty of the Engi is that he isn't merely an overtuned and overpowered class. He is very intelligently and smartly designed to be a boss character of sorts. Taking out a sentry nest isn't just a steep challenge, it's a climactic effort that precedes every major milestone. After a slow but steady push against the opposing army, after both teams meet in force at the heavily defended back line, after a final desperate invasion, you and your comrades unload everything you got onto their fortification. It all goes up in fire and sparks as those three ear-tickling electronic explosions go off in quick succession and the objective is captured. That genius loop of rising and falling action is what makes TF2 more than just another generic play for points FPS. It takes one of the toughest challenges in game design, giving pace and structure to a chaotic multiplayer game without forcing pace and structure, and crushes it into a trash cube with one hand. Everything about the Engi's design feels so fair and natural that, despite probably being the hardest and most time-consuming class to kill in practice, it seldom feels frustrating to be stumped by him over and over. The only time people complain about engineers, in-game or otherwise, is when the other team has 3 or more of them set up in close proximity. Yes, of course, he's still not a perfect class. On some maps, it can be way too easy for Red to turtle. Battle Engi on High Tower's a menace. Some of his unlocks are way too good, some are way too bad, and some are just pointless. And if nobody wants to play the class as a counter him, it can be a total lockout. Those are all issues that could be worked on, fixed, and improved, but even with all of that, he still achieves everything I spent the last who knows how many minutes praising him for. And for that, at least in my opinion, he deserves the rank of the #1 class in Team Fortress 2.
Next time on Balls.
Oh, this is terrible. Oi, who would want to stop English equally anyway?